Hello class, I'm Professor Shaw. This week, week 15, covering chapter 15 is group 15, myself, Nicholas, and Fred. We are doing underprivileged deviance. Underprivileged deviance defined in the text says that it's deviance that typically occurs among underprivileged people who come from a relatively poor and powerless background. It is generally distinguishable from a privileged deviance in being less profitable. Examples of underprivileged deviance include, and that we're going to be covering, is robbery, burglary, shoplifting, auto theft and carjacking, and organized crime. I will be covering shoplifting, auto theft, and organized crime, and Fred will be covering robbery and burglary. So, shoplifting. Good times, right? Just kidding. Shoplifting is considered the act of stealing a good from a retail establishment, also known as shrinkage to those that are in the industry. Usually done so by customers, patrons, employees, and mistaken of inventory. It has become a serious financial problem, even though most property crime has decreased in recent years. Cost of shoplifting costs shops $33.5 billion annually. Unfortunately, due to the shrinkage, the prices are then raised so that we are making up for the difference. There's two types of social profiles when it comes to shoplifting, and that's going to be boosters and snitches. Boosters, who are professional shoplifters, they steal for profit. And then snitches are amateurs, more often juveniles, youngsters. They steal small valued items for personal gain. A lot of times, young teenage girls will steal like lip gloss, as an example. And that group, the younger the group, from 11 to 15, is the largest group of shoplifters. More often than not, shoplifting is done during non-school days, afternoons, weekends, and evenings. And items most taken are going to be beauty products, music and videos, appeal, and athletic shoes. That's kind of interesting, shoes. Kind of hard to steal those, no? The age group above 50 are least likely to commit the offense, but most are often featured in news outlets. So it seems like it's a large group when it really isn't. Celebrities rarely steal, but when they do steal and when they are caught, all of a sudden they suffer from kleptomania, a neurotic impulse to steal. The general public's view on shoplifting is that it's more of a female crime. And this is based off a surveyed amount of shoplifters that have been apprehended, but it doesn't really count the ones that haven't been apprehended, so we really don't know in the end if it really is a female crime. Let's see. Those that are more likely to steal are going to be statistically lower class, unemployed, or homeless, drug addicts. African Americans are more likely to steal than whites, and also steal more relatively expensive items, while whites will still steal small valued products. Let's see, motivation behind shoplifting, or I guess I should say the causes of shoplifting are due to motivation and opportunity. Both are economically and sociologically motivated, economically driven by property, unemployment, and frugal customers, and also social psychological drive is from the sense of thrill, excitement, and just because it's fun. It also is a desire of social acceptance and rationalization to justify the crime. Opportunities, it's really anyone can really steal, happen anyone every day. The risk of being apprehended is minimal, and that's because of the lackness from law enforcement, and a lot of times, more often than not, store owners do not want to press charges in case it comes back as negative publicity. Auto theft and carjacking. Various property crimes have decreased over the past 20 years, but auto theft and carjacking was by 36%. The decline is due to manufacturers installing more sophisticated electronics to deter auto theft. In the 1960s and 70s, many auto thefts were done by teenagers for joyriding. Who can speak? Today, auto theft is done for a quick and handsome profit. Auto theft is a big business worth over $5.2 billion annually. Auto thefts do not usually involve violence, as the owners are typically not away. They're usually in their house or at work or shopping at the mall. However, carjackings typically do involve some type of violence. Carjackings happen more often at highway rest stops, gas stations, fast food outlets, car washes, red lights, and malls. Methods used are a pistol to the head or a bump and run, staging a minor rear-end accident. In the 1990s, about half of carjackings, the offender got away. Most carjackers are African American, but so are their victims. Most vulnerable to carjacking are people who are most likely to become victims themselves. In general, more men than women, more blacks than whites. More Hispanic than non-Hispanic, more divorced than married, and more urban than rural residents. Causes is going to be motivated by a strong monetary gain. It's going to be derived from the poor, the lower class. Opportunity is very abundant. Everybody has cars, especially in major cities like LA. Law enforcement has made it easy to steal cars. Out of our nation's 500,000 police officers, less than 3,000 will investigate auto thefts. Prisons are overcrowded with violent and drug convicts, so most car thieves only get probation. And profitability is high. American cars overseas can double and triple in value. And insurance fraud. Vehicle owner contracts with the thief for money. A decrease in auto thefts has increased carjacking due to the increased sophistication of the car's security devices. Alarms, steering wheel locks, GPS, and ignition controlled systems. Yeah, that's carjacking. Yeah. Continuing on to organized crime. Organized crimes, they are typically participants in an organized crime that are trying to achieve the American dream, but by socially disreputable, deviant means. There is a structure to organized crimes. A lot of times you might think of the Italian Mafia, that movie The Godfather. Pretty good, you should see it if you haven't. But many crime groups in the U.S. consist of members of the same race or ethnicity. Best known is the Mafia, also known as the mob. They are going to be, the mob is going to be mostly Italian American. The Mafia is a relatively loose, informal confederation of diverse groups of professional criminals operating independently in large cities and around the country. There's a hierarchical structure of positions from high to low that goes Don, the boss, underboss, lieutenants, counselors, and soldiers. Soldiers are pretty much the footmen. They do all the grunt work. Governed by a code of conduct, two most important rules is loyalty to the family, the mob, and also secrecy. Two basic characteristics of an organization is going to be the well-defined hierarchy of positions and the code of conduct. Organized crimes activities, those can and will be different depending on the organized unit, but they do have one thing in common. They specialize in one or two forms of economic deviance while conforming their operation to a limited area, usually an ethnic community, with one group being the exception. The Italian American crime operates over the entire country in a variety of activities. Organized crime groups can get into selling illegal goods and services, illicit gambling, loan sharks, narcotics, large-scale theft, racketeering, protection in labor, corruption of political officials, and infiltrating legitimate businesses like hotels and motels, casinos, health services, and pretty much anything that they think was going to be an economic benefit. The current infiltration is so deep that the FBI one time unknowingly hired a mob's moving company. Objectives for doing all of these behaviors and actions is to gain respectability, establish a legitimate source of income to avoid income tax prosecution, invest their bad or dirty money into a legitimate business, Organized crime does run deep into American society. It goes back to the 18th century. 18th century gangs like the Reno Brothers or the Jesse James Gang were well known. The Irish took over the 19th century, followed by the Jews, then the Italians, who still are in control today, and that's going to be due to Prohibition. They saw an opportunity, took advantage, and lo and behold, they're still here. Due to federal government teaming together since the 1990s, the Italian mafia's influence has weakened significantly as most of the members and mob bosses have been persecuted and convicted. The formation and control, there's 4 stages that a gang must go through to reach the top. 1, they must form a gang in their own ethnic neighborhoods. 2, compete with other gangs in order to dominate in a local crime area. 3, resolve their conflict to form larger crime organizations, so they must settle inter-gang disputes by peaceful means. And 4, various crime organizations compete with one another, resulting in the emergence of one ethnic group as the victor. Today, African, Hispanic, Asian American, and other gangs are stuck in the second stage, with most conflicts are drug-related. Again, the second stage is compete with other gangs in order to dominate the local crime area. A global perspective is going to be dissecting other countries like Italy, Japan, Hong Kong, and Russia. They all reveal similarities to U.S. organized crime. The Yakuza is a crime family in Japan. The Triad in Hong Kong. In Russia, has except that it is are all similar, but I guess Russia is the exception, in which that they have a ton of distrust and betrayal amongst the members, often to sell each other out to avoid prison. Due to the depthness of the underworld penetration into the conventional upper world, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get rid of the organized crime. However, given its limited influence in the United States society, American authorities are more successful in keeping it under their thumb. So that's my portion. Follow up next will be Fred, and then that will cover again Chapter 15, Underprivileged Deviance. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Fred Zimmelinghouse. I'm sending this video on Chapter 15, Underprivileged Deviance, regarding robbery. Robbery is a property crime, is a rational, calculated act, as it involves a rational decision to act. Deciding to rob mostly for financial gains. You have to decide what target to rob and how to carry out the robbery. Deciding to rob is usually for money. Most robbers the deciding factor in a robbery is money. But psychiatrists tend to assume that armed robbers are basically abnormal, suffering from a sense of inadequacy and weakness, and therefore committing robbery with a firearm as a way of self-adequacy and power. Deciding who to rob usually involves 2 factors. Robbers consider the lucrative establishments such as banks, grocery stores, and other places where large sums of money are available. Or they select among targets one with a lower risk of arrest. Thus, robbers choose, for example, to hold up a branch in an outlying commercial area where fewer people are around rather than the bank in the busy district. And deciding how to rob is the last decision involving the varying plans. One extreme, some robbers, particularly professional ones who are after a big score, plan their crimes with great care and minute detail. Some robbers, especially amateur ones who suddenly feel the need for a small sum of cash, commit robbery on spur of the moment. A robbery can be a violent crime. There are 2 facets of robbery as a violent crime. One involves violence, the other potential violence. Because unarmed robbers usually resort to actual violence to subdue the victim. Hence, the crime is also called strong arm robbery. Armed robberies tend to rely only on the potential threat of violence, thereby making the other form without a weapon actually a lot more dangerous. Armed robbery and potential violence as a threat of force, potential violence in armed robbery rarely turns into real violence because the weapon, particularly a firearm, ensures the successful execution of the crime. Um, the patterns of robbery rate in large cities is many times higher than in rural areas. The weather also plays a part in the patterns of robbery, being that the majority occur during the colder months, peaking in December when people have more cash, and the robbers can wear large coats to conceal their weapons. Amateur robbers can be broken down to three types. The opportunist robber, typically older ladies with purses, cab drivers, drunks, and people who walk along the street. Addict robbers committing robberies to support their drug habit, to conceal their weapons. Amateur robbers can be broken down to three types. The opportunist robber, typically older ladies with purses, cab drivers, drunks, and people who walk along the street. Addict robbers committing robberies to support their drug habit. They tend to target individuals, maybe drug dealers who carry cash and are reluctant to call the police. They usually don't plan the robbery. They try to make it easier by seeking a vulnerable victim, and they often get in a situation that unexpectedly turns into a robbery. For instance, getting into a fight, and as an afterthought, they take their money. Um, Now I'm going to switch over to burglary. As with other property crimes, burglary has declined very drastically in the last 20 years or so. Nevertheless, burglars still steal more than $4 billion of the property a year, about half the cost of auto thefts. Their modus operandi, burglars are characteristically rational and calculating. Um, Most are committed during the day when the homes are empty because the occupants are at work, at school, out shopping, or away on vacation. The most popular time is between 9 and 11 and from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. These are the hours when people are most likely to go out, except for a few cat burglaries, which can happen at night by being very quiet